We all appreciate humor, and most of us are envious of those we think of as humorous. Our guest today would say something different, that humor is human. But as leaders, business is business and needs to be taken seriously, right? Today, we're talking about how we can become better leaders through the effective and intentional use of humor. Prepare for a fun and fresh foray into how you can be a better leader by using humor to create trust, connection, and yes, even some levity. We do that again. 3, 2, 1. We all appreciate humor, and most of us are envious of those we think of as humorous. But our guest today would say something different, that humor is human. And so today we're talking about how we can be better leaders through the use of humor. Prepare for fun and a fresh foray into how you can be a better leader by being a more humorous leader. Welcome to another episode of the Remarkable Leadership Podcast, where we are helping leaders like you grow personally and professionally to lead more effectively and make a bigger positive difference for your team, organization, and the world. If you are listening to this podcast in the future, you could join us live. And to do that, you have to find out when we're doing these live. And so the best way to do that is to join us on our Facebook or LinkedIn groups, just two of the platforms where these are live streamed. You can do that by going to remarkablepodcast.com/Facebook or remarkablepodcast.com/LinkedIn. And if you do that, you'll find out when these are happening, when you can join us. Hope that you will do that. And then you would be with us live. Today, you're not, if you're on the podcast, but you're going to get the chance to meet this gentleman I'm going to introduce to you right now. His name is Adam Christing. He is a humor expert and the founder and CEO of Clean Comedians, using the power of laughter to inspire, connect, and create unforgettable experiences without the need for profanity or politics. Adam has been featured on Entertainment Tonight and in more than 100 podcasts, TV, and radio programs. His comedy has delighted over 1 million people across 49 states. You've got one missing, Adam, as well as Canada, Europe, and Asia. He's also the author of the brand new book, The Laughter Factor, the 5 humor tactics to link, lift, and lead. So, Adam, thanks for being here. Glad to have you. We share a publisher, and so that's one thing we have in common. I'm glad that you're here.
Hey, thanks a lot, Kevin. I appreciate that intro. The one state that's missing is Maine. I've been to entertaining and motivating in 49 of the 50. So maybe
where are the people in Bangor? We need the people from Bangor to bang your phone.
We need a laughter lobster fest or something to make it happen. But
yeah. Alliteration. You see, you may have noticed I used alliteration already, and it's not really in the book, although it's one of my favorite things. Maybe it's not humorous, except to Kevin. I don't know. So listen, I want to dive into a lot of the stuff about humor and laughter and all that, but I want to start by having you tell us what the big idea, Adam, of the book is. What's the big idea of the Laughter Factor?
Great question. I think the big idea is that humor is a shortcut to trust. And as leaders, I think our currency is trust. And obviously leaders need to worry about getting results, and maybe there's management, of course, casting a vision, but you can't really do that unless you bring your people together. And so humor is just a fantastic way to get people feeling a sense of camaraderie and connection. And even though Mother Teresa was not a stand-up comedian, she was an incredible leader. And she said something that I mentioned in the book: a smile is the shortest distance between two people. So I believe we can, you read the subtitle of my book, Kevin, which is an alliteration: link, lift, and lead. I think link comes first. We link hearts and emotions and a sense of unity, and then we can better lead people.
So one of the things that I like to think about, and I think about this when I'm picking guests who pitch to be on the show, and I think about that when I think about the books that I choose to read that aren't going to be on the show. And the question I often ask is, so why this person? So that's the big idea, that humor builds trust. And so why you? Why are you the guy to write this book?
Kevin, I'm really not the guy. I wrote the book under a pseudonym. I'm actually managing a trucking company. No, I'm the guy because I've made every
There's
mistake.
nothing wrong with trucking companies, by the way.
No, it's
I interacted with one of our clients this morning who leads a trucking company.
One of my best friends is a trucker, and he's one of the funniest guys I know. Shout out to David Donovan. No, I'm the guy because I've made every mistake you can possibly make on stage, on live podcasts, emceeing events, being hired as a keynote speaker. And so I've inadvertently offended people. I haven't slipped into profanity, thankfully, but I've done jokes where the timing was off for whatever reason. And so because I've given more than 4,000 humor presentations, I've just really learned what works and what doesn't work. And what I think we uncovered with the book is, just like there are, according to Dr. Gary Chapman, 5 love languages, there are 5 humor tactics. And I like the phrase laugh languages. And so you don't have to be a professional comedian or a stand-up or a hilarious storyteller even to tap into the power of humor. And I think you mentioned this earlier. I love this concept that we're humor beings. So because you're human, you do have a sense of humor. It might be hidden. You might not be aware of it. You might feel embarrassed by it, or you just might not feel comfortable using it. But when you tap into your way, when you find you're funny, it really can enhance your ability as a leader or manager of people.
So, when I got the book in the mail and I started looking at it, and before I said thumbs up, to Lisa, that the producer, that we should have you on, I was thinking that, as a keynote speaker person, that the book might come from that perspective, and that perspective is certainly in here. That's your background. That's a big part of what you do. But you've done a good job already of helping us see, why this matters to us as leaders specifically. One of the things that I often hear from leaders when we end up talking about something like humor is, well, isn't it kind of risky? I mean, obviously, we have a lot of people. I mentioned this in the opening, that say, well, I wish I had a sense of, I wish I could tell jokes. I wish that was me. It's not me, et cetera, et cetera. But that's not the only source of the risk. Just talk about, as if I'm a sitting leader in an organization and I'm listening to you talk about, well, laughter and humor. And I'm thinking, well, number one, this is serious work. And number two, if I do it, isn't it a big risk if it doesn't go well? So can you talk about those two sort of practical points before we dive in?
Yes, those are really practical points. I mean, one of the golden rules in the book, I sprinkled tips and tactics throughout the book. And one of them is, if in doubt, leave it out. So there can be a lot at stake. You're leading a sales meeting, you're in a conference room, you're giving an annual update. And so there's a lot at stake. So if in doubt, leave it out. At the same time, it reminds me of when people say, I'm just not good with remembering names. And the truth is they probably believe that. And so then it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy, right? And so what happens is we don't
100%.
take a moment and say, okay, that's Kevin, and lock in. Okay, he's got glasses, he's got cool hair. I'm gonna take a moment to prioritize learning Kevin's name. In the same way, I love Mark Twain's quote. He said, it takes me 3 weeks to prepare a good impromptu speech. And so you can be intentional with your humor and say, it may not be that I'm doing a joke or a funny skit. It might be that I'm showing a funny slide, or I'm having the worst dad joke contest, or I'm doing an icebreaker. But you, as a leader, can be a facilitator of fun, even when you feel like stand-up comedy is not your thing.
Yeah, and I love that. And we're going to get into some of those points in a second. I want to get to a line that you said in the book that I won't get quite right, but you said there's only a couple times when humor might not apply, and you said funerals, maybe, and breakups. And the reason that struck me is that when I think about my father's funeral, and I think about the various eulogies that were given for him, the things that everyone still talks about are the things that were funny, the funny stories that people told about my dad or being with my dad. So I think that just reminded, that line reminded me, is that, if it's done from the heart and it's done with good intention, obviously intention, we can mess up even when our intentions are good. Yet that I think that the number of times when it doesn't apply are really relatively small.
Yes, I'm sorry about your dad's passing. I lost my dad about 6 months ago, and
No, if I'd have known that, I wouldn't have said that.
no, no, no. He taught me how to tell jokes. My mom is the funniest person I've ever known. She's like a modern day, Carol Burnett for your listeners and viewers who remember that show. But just like you're talking about, it was almost like we put the fun in funeral. We didn't try. We didn't like say we're going to do stand-up comedy. It was just appropriate honoring someone. And so one of the laugh languages, I'm sure we'll get into these, is called poke. And the goal there is actually to celebrate other people by pointing out quirky things. Like my dad loved to go out to breakfast. Pretty much every day he'd go out to breakfast. So uh, we had funny stories about, how he would mop up the egg yolks with his toast. And it's like, it's not stand-up comedy material, but it's endearing. And so going back to the power of intention,
Yeah.
if you think, okay, I just have to make them fall out of their chair laughing, you're probably setting yourself up and your audience up for disappointment. But if you think, I'm going to smile first, I'm going to enjoy what I have to share, and I'm going to plan some fun moments in my presentation or my update, you really can sort of engineer, orchestrate good times for people. And so sometimes I call this, Kevin, planned spontaneity. So I talk about this in the book. One of the most boring personalities I remember was happened to be a man named Earl, who was also one of the world's greatest sleight of hand artists. With a deck of cards, he could blow your mind. So he didn't tell jokes. He didn't wear funny outfits, but he would make a card disappear or change colors in your hand. And I noticed as a kid growing up near Hollywood Magic Shop, people were busting up, and I started thinking, well, that's not him trying to be funny. It's him using planned spontaneity, surprise, the power of surprise. So at the heart of humor is surprise. And you can try this as a business leader. Send someone a funny birthday card instead of just buying the typical "you're great, have a great birthday." You can even order like half birthday cards that are like cut in half 6 months out from their birthday. I guarantee you they're going to smile and laugh, and more importantly, they're going to feel celebrated.
Yeah, so we go back to humor as a builder of trust, humor as a builder of connection. I think that's excellent. We've now mentioned briefly two of the five laugh languages: surprise and poke. It's actually poke that I want to spend some time on, because I think that it's one that we have to be careful with. Uh, I think it can be incredibly valuable, and I think it requires some skill to do it well. And I mean, obviously, you're the expert, you're not me. But let's just talk about poke. What you mean by this as one of the laugh languages? So let's make sure people are clear on it, because I'm kind of ahead of the curve because I've read the book. Let's talk
Right.
about that first, and then I have a couple of questions about it.
Yeah, I would say of the five humor tactics, poke is the trickiest because although sarcasm is funny, some people say, "Hey, my love language is sarcasm." But as a leader, sarcasm is very dangerous because there's almost always a put down built in.
It's in there,
It,
right?
it's just in there. However, if you start with the biggest target, the one looking at you in the mirror, that's a great place to really learn how to do poke, and that's to poke fun at yourself. So for example, you mentioned our company, cleancomedians.com is the company. We came up with the motto. I came up with the motto. I was very proud of this. Humor doesn't have to be filthy to be funny. And we had that motto printed on about 100 brochures. We mailed it out to corporations and theaters and colleges, but there was a typo I didn't catch. And so here's what it said: Clean Comedians is an association of professional comedians who believe it doesn't have to be funny. Just kind of takes the pressure off me.
Kind of took the there's no punchline there.
That's right. That's right. But when I share that on stage, people, I don't feel like they're laughing at me. They're laughing with me because I am having fun with one of my own flops. And so when I consult with leaders, what blows them away is when they go back to maybe their earlier work as a manager or as a salesperson, and they share a story of when they got a rejection from a customer or when the company suffered a big loss, and they take ownership of it and point out their own foibles or failures. The opposite of what we think will happen happens. People say, "Oh, I can relate to her now. I want to follow her now. She's human. She's authentic."
That's really where I wanted to go, because so many leaders feel so much pressure, um, much of it, but not all of it necessarily self-imposed,
Right.
that I'm supposed to have the answers. I'm supposed to get it right. And like, while all of us, to our friend will say, like, I learn from my mistakes, none of us want to show them to our teams. And what you're describing is a way to be self-deprecating, and at the same time sharing the authenticity, but sharing the lesson that, hey, that's okay. So what else would you say
Well, I want to throw
about
in.
the poke
Yeah.
to help, because you said is tricky. How do we do it better?
Well, first on the self-deprecating, I prefer the word self-effacing, and it's not that big of a difference. But you want to. Well, here's what you want to avoid: self-defeating humor. You don't want to tell a story where you didn't learn a lesson, where you're ripping on your own character or your own integrity. That's not good. But flops are funny. I mean, you think of slapstick comedy. It's just we're always laughing at people. Like Stan Laurel is probably my favorite comedian in human history, Laurel and Hardy, and he always made himself and his partner the butt of the joke. And you knew that they knew they're creating this stuff. And so when you can make yourself the source of the humor, you really can't go wrong if you keep it self-effacing. Now, where it's really tricky is when we turn it and tease other people. And rather than just talk theoretically with you, I'll give you an example. Last weekend, I was hosting an event in Florida, about 150 people. I was the MC, and comedians call this piece crowd work, where I've got a handheld microphone. I'm going into the audience. I don't know what's going to happen. Now, this was a friendly audience. This was a private fundraising event. Super nice people, no hecklers. But I just walked up to this gentleman. I forget his name. Let's say Rich. And I go, "Hey, Rich, we've got free time this afternoon after the session. What do you think you'll be doing?" And he said, "I think I'll be doing the hokey pokey," or just some crazy thing. And he said it in such an endearing way that throughout the rest of the conference, I kept poking about that. And I say, "We've added a seminar with Rich. Who'll be doing a thing, how to harness your hokey pokey, whatever." And it just became this running joke. But I was poking at him after I knew that he would like it. And
Right.
so think about nicknames. Don't call someone a nickname unless you know they like it. Is it affirming? I have a wonderful assistant named Masha, and she likes the nickname Blaze. In fact, she even has it on her license plate. So I'm not poking fun at her when I call her Blaze. I'm celebrating her. So what I like to do is encourage people to find what's actually going well and celebrate that. Now, if someone they wear a funky sweater, they're known for flashy shoes, they say certain expressions all the time. If you sense that they actually appreciate that being mentioned, you can have so much fun with that.
Yeah, I love that, and that's where I wanted you to go. I wanted you to think about how do we poke without being critical, without being cynical, without being sarcastic, and that was a very, very helpful. So we've got these five laugh languages. Everybody, surprise and poke, we've talked about, and you've just hinted in this last story, Adam, about the third type, which is what you call the in joke. So let's talk about that one a little bit more, because there's risk here too if you get the ins and outs wrong, right?
Yes, years ago, another of my humor heroes, Steve Martin, did this joke. I think it's on his first album, and he's performing in San Francisco. And he says, "Hey, I heard some plumbers are in town." And he did this long-winded joke about, this lawn supervisor was out on a sprinkler maintenance job. He just did this like inside humor about plumbers. At the end of the joke, there was zero laughter. And he said, "Are those plumbers in town this week, or is that next week?" And so the key to in jokes is knowing your audience, who's in the room. What are your shared experiences? One of the things I do as a speaker is I talk about acronyms a lot. Like I'll say, I fly a lot through Atlanta because I fly Delta. So I'll say, turns out Delta stands for do every leg through Atlanta. And that might get a nice chuckle. But then I do this, Kevin. I take all 26 letters of the English alphabet, put them up on the screen, and I do an acronym about the company or the organization where I'm highlighting all these things about them. And usually the XYZ is, with extreme youthful zeal or something like that. But people feel celebrated. And back to the point of this laughter language is they feel like, oh, he gets us. He celebrates us. He knows us. And so these are jokes and bits that would never play in a theater or on a Netflix special. But for your group, you feel like, wow, we're a special team. Sometimes there's a little bit of an us versus them. So sometimes as a group, you're poking some fun at a competitor. You're a shared frustration, like, hey, the last time we got a new printer was, 2002. That's not funny to you and I, but in a group that's experiencing that frustration, that can be comedy gold.
Right. You said something else I think it's really important, and I've sort of mentioned it at the start, that while if you are an aspiring keynote speaker or master of ceremonies, there's great value in this conversation and in this book. But as you said, we're not shooting here as leaders. We're not shooting for a Netflix special. We're not shooting for stand up. We're shooting for the smile, the chuckle, the connection that comes from humor inside of our team. Fair?
Very fair. I think as leaders, what we're shooting for is inspiring laughter and life change. And inspiring laughter, again, doesn't mean that you necessarily get the applause. It might be like coming up with the craziest trophies for the annual sales meeting. And as dumb as those might seem to someone outside your organization, inside your organization, like, I can't wait till next year. Like I was at an event one time where they spent, I think, close to $1 million on an annual retreat, special rental cars. Everything was cushy, unbelievable meals. There was a couple private jets. But what they remembered was some silly skits that the managers did. That's what created the memory that they would talk about for years to come.
Not all that. Not all of that.
Right.
Not all the dollars.
Right. I mean, it does help to be in a nice place and
Well,
enjoy
of
that.
course, of
But
course.
I do think people make a mistake as leaders, and they think that it's where you meet that's so crucial. I do think that's important, but I think the why is almost always galvanizing our group together. And humor, it's not the star of the show, but it's like the cement. It glues our hearts and minds together, which reminds me, I wanted to share with you one of the surprising things I discovered in my research for the book was how science is just showing over and over again that we feel before we think. And sometimes as leaders, we just get into thinking mode. I've got to come up with the strategy. I've got to share the strategy. Well, that's important, but you need to bring people together. And humor is like magic when it comes to making people feel like we're experiencing something as a group that no one else knows about. We are, and that goes back to the power of in jokes. Nothing says friendship like a joke that only 3 people get.
Yep, that's awesome. There are 2 more languages, and the last one is Amplify. But the one I really want you to, and that one, well, maybe we should spend a minute there. I think about that as the longer version of humor, the story, if you will. Let's talk about Amplify, because maybe this is the one that might be most accessible for some of us.
Yeah, I think it really is because I think human beings were all prone to exaggeration, and that would be another word for this humor tactic. Amplify is exaggerate. So here's a secret trick way of doing this: is take a shared frustration in your company or in the financial market or whatever it is, and just amplify it. So for example, if it's really cold, you're in Minnesota and it's already getting super cold in November, let's say, rather than saying, man, it's really cold outside, you might amplify that, just amp it up and say, my Starbucks is selling coffee on a stick. Or I just made that up, but
Right.
take a frustration and amplify it. And you can study other people who do this in their writing, or arguably the greatest stand-up of the last 50 years, or certainly one of the top three would be Robin Williams. And what people don't know is he had a book that he would travel with, like a notebook full of stories, jokes, one-liners, and he would wait for the right moment on stage to unleash these things, but they were already in his mind, and then he would just amplify them. He would just put it on steroids. So if you have this laugh language, chances are, if you get frustrated at the grocery store, you can turn that into this epic tale that sounds like, you were hiking the Himalayas when really there were five people ahead of you in the checkout line, right?
Right.
So
Right.
exaggerate the details, exaggerate the pain. And one tip I'll give you, if storytelling and amplifying is your knack with humor, is don't jump on your own punchline. Give it room. So if the end of a story is one word or one sentence, people they'll walk on it. They'll say the joke and then they'll say something like, "Do you get it?" or "What do you think?" Is you have to, as a leader, you have to kind of sit for a moment, and you'll usually be rewarded with laughter. And now if they don't laugh, that becomes funny too.
Yeah. That's what happens to me some of the time, Adam. I try, and then I become self-effacing about it. So,
There you go. There you go.
so the fifth language, although we did them out of order, I don't know that it matters.
No.
Is wordplay. One of my favorites of the five. Talk about wordplay. Give us a couple of examples.
Well, maybe my favorite wordplay master of all time is a comedian that's a lot of people don't know, but one of the greats is Stephen Wright, just a master of language. Like he would say, well, part of it was his delivery was very deadpan. So he would say something like, I put spot remover on my dog. Now he's gone. So it's wordplay is just clever banter, language, quotations, puns, even dad jokes fall in this category. You might be strong in this area, Kevin, because you're an author and you love alliteration. And so I'll give you an example that's very practical for business is test language. So let's say you're sending an email out that's really stakes are high. Play with option A and option B. So for example, in my company, Clean Comedians, I thought it was so clever. And I came up with this headline. We were sending this to Las Vegas convention bookers, and it said, "Don't gamble on the entertainment at your convention." It's pretty clever. And then I said, well, let's test this other one. And the other one said, "Give your group the gift of laughter." Now, that's not funny, but it had this ring to it. And so my point here is find the humor that's yours. If wordplay is your thing, practice a pun, a dad joke, a story that's based on, a rhyme or something like that, and test it as a leader. Test it in situations where the stakes are lower, with family, with friends, with associates. So when it comes time for the big awards program, you already know it's going to work. Like there are jokes that I just know 99 times out of 100, I'm going to get a laugh because I've tested it.
So, if I were to start to put a wrap around all the stuff that we've said, and I'm talking to all of you as leaders listening, one of the things, Adam, that you said was the idea of planned spontaneity. And think about everybody, how many times Adam has said something that related to that, whether it's testing it, whether that's Robin Williams and his book, whether it's whatever it is. Like there's been 4 or 5 times that fundamentally it's come back to like, let me prepare for this rather than making it, having to force something in a moment. And I will bet you too that the people that you think are so skilled at it, including the examples Adam has given, are skilled not because they did it off the cuff, but because they had planned it, because they
That's
had
right.
practiced it, because they had been thoughtful and intentional about it.
And by the way, sometimes that can be as simple as preparing a question. And it's not doing a joke, it's not doing a comedy bit. So let's say I wanted to lead a 10-minute icebreaker with a group of associates. I might ask a simple question like, what's the craziest holiday gift you've ever received? That's not a funny question, but the answers will be funny. Someone will say, my wife put a potato in my stocking, or my kids, broke a bunch of crayons. And pretty soon you've got 10 minutes. I guarantee you probably have some heart touching stories too. If you ask the question, most memorable holiday gift, there'll be some very meaningful ones. But I can get 10, 15 minutes out of something like that with an audience by just preparing a thoughtful question.
Yep. So the question comes in, and before we start to wrap up, I'm going to have you take this. How do you gracefully recover or recover gracefully when a joke doesn't land?
Great question, Kevin. Any others?
Nope, that's the one I got.
I'm kidding. Well, here's the thing. Here's first what not to do. First, don't blame the listeners. If you say to someone, get it, chances are they didn't get it, right? So there is that awkward, delicious moment where you drop the last line and you just wait. And the longer you wait, when they do get it, the bigger the laugh. Now, if you wait more than a few seconds and there's no laugh, you can laugh at yourself. So sometimes I'll pretend like this is a handheld microphone. I might take that if I'm on stage. I might say, well, that's going out of the speech, and cross it out. So now I'm using self-effacing humor. But chances are you will get a laugh if you don't step on the moment. And like you said earlier, if you don't get I know I'm aging myself with this reference, but Johnny Carson was the king of late night talk. He got bigger laughs when he didn't get laughs by just sitting with it for a moment. The audience would just so enjoy that moment, and they will with you too. And so one more tip, don't laugh at your own jokes. Sometimes in our nervousness, we'll say a joke and then we'll just start laughing. Let the audience, the straighter face you deliver a punchline with or story conclusion, bigger chance you're going to get a laugh.
All right. Is there one thing, as we start to wrap up, Adam, is there one thing, and I know there's never one thing, right? But is there one thing that you would encourage everyone who's watching or listening to do first on their own journey to put laughter and humor into their work as a leader? Where would you ask them or encourage them to start?
I think it starts with thinking about what you enjoy, because chances are you will find your laugh language, your go-to way. If you want to find your funny, think about what makes you laugh, what you enjoy. And it might be visual stuff. Like I love variety. I love comedy, juggling, and magic and ventriloquism, but it might be the one-liner. Chances are what you enjoy is what you will employ to make other people laugh. And one other thing, this would be a little like leadership advance. And I know your listeners are all about being remarkable leaders. To go to the next level, I've listened more people into laughter than I've talked into laughter. And here's what I mean. If you can listen for your associates, your customers, your coworkers, what are their laugh languages, and then feed them that. So if you have a punster at your office and you give them a book of dad jokes, you might have just made their week or month, right?
Right. Yeah. Any communication that's focused on them more than on us is going to have a better chance of success, including humor. I love that, Adam.
That's
Thank
right.
you. There's a question, and I didn't even realize till just this very moment the paradoxical nature of this question, because there are two questions that I pretty much ask everyone always. And one of them, is coming in a second. The other one you don't know. I always ask people this, and now I'm talking to you. It seems funny to me to ask this question. What do you do for fun?
Yes. Sometimes what I do for fun is anything that's not forcing me to be funny. Like it's crazy, but I love disc golf. I like playing internet chess, and I play where each side gets 3 minutes. And so it's kind of this adrenaline rush of will the game get done? I love classic rock and roll. I'm a Bob Dylan fanatic. I love his lyrics. And by the way, some of them are very funny and very witty. Uh, but I'll be really transparent with you, Kevin, and with your audience. I think leaders sometimes we're wounded healers, right? So some of the saddest people I know are comedians. And I think it's because we can give out what we also need. So there are times when I have to say, you know what? I don't need to read another philosophy book or marketing book. I'm going to read something that I actually enjoy.
Which takes me to my last question. So, what are you reading these days?
Well, not only am I reading a classic, but this you're the first person I'm sharing this with. In fact, my wife doesn't even know. But I bought this thing on eBay that is a collection of Dale Carnegie's speaking course from like the 1940s or 50s. And so I'm going back to Carnegie, who wrote a book that sold a measly 30 million copies, How to Win Friends and Influence People. And it's just a great reminder to me that in the end, it's how we make people feel. And I'll never forget, I don't think it's in that book, How to Win Friends and Influence People, but I read somewhere where Carnegie was asked, Dale, how do you sell so much? And he said, because I'm sold. And so it's reminding me of the power of your conviction. If you believe you can use humor, you can. If you believe you can lead people, you can. If you believe you can bring people together, you can, if you're intentional about it.
I love that. So Adam, you came on to share gave us your time to share your talent and to give us wisdom. So where can people learn more about you, connect with you? Where do you want to point people? Where can they get the book? I'll hold the book up for those who are watching while you do that.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate it. And I love that your book is marked up. I had a mentor who said, when you mark in a book marks in you. But the book's available on Amazon, of course. And if you want to take a free quiz in 4 minutes, you can discover your laugh language. You just go to thelaughterfactor.com. Uh,
Thelaughterfactor.com. And you
right.
told
Don't
me
forget
in
the word
the
you said it right. Yeah.
laughterfactor.com. Sorry about that.
Well, no,
And
you said it right. You said it right. But I say that because I really have noticed people getting such a kick when they go to that site. They can take the quiz, it's free. And in like 4 minutes, you'll discover what your go to laugh language is.
you told me before we started that and you said it here too, that you're active on LinkedIn, so people can find you there. And I encourage people to do exactly that as well. So before we go, everybody, I have a question for you. I'm done asking questions of Adam. Enough of Adam. I have a question for all of you. It's the same question I ask you every single episode. It's simple. The question is simple. Now what? But the answer is important. Your answer to that question is what will make the last 30 minutes of your life more valuable, which is, what am I going to do with what I got? What ideas am I going to take action on? Because until you act, it won't really make a difference. I encourage you. This should be a fun set of things to go try. I encourage you to do that. And I encourage you to come back next week. So, Adam, thanks so much for being here. It was a pleasure to have you. I enjoyed our time together. I hope you did as well.
I had a great time. Thanks so much.
And so, everybody, if you enjoyed this, you'll enjoy next week. It won't be about humor, but we'll be back next week as we are every week. I hope you'll be back to join us. Wherever you're watching or listening, make sure you're subscribed so you don't miss another episode of the Remarkable Leadership Podcast.